B'siyata Deshmaya, we're going to learn Yuma Daf Nun Gimel. We're going to start 11 lines from the top of Daf Nun Beis, Omid Beis, from the next Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, and we'll remember that in the previous Mishnah, Daf earlier on Daf Nun Aleph Omid Beis, the Mishnah told us that the Kohen Gadol, holding the shovel of the coals in his right hand, the cuff with the Ketores in the other hand, and he was now walked through the Heichal. We discussed in the previous Mishnah exactly what direction he took, how he got to the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and he's now at the curtains of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And these Mishnayos are discussing the second Beis HaMikdash, where there were two curtains or one curtain. That's a discussion previously. But the Chachomim in the Mishnah, they hold there were two curtains, and he's now reached the outermost curtain of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Hachitzoino hoisa perufa min hadorim. The outer curtain was pinned up from the Dorim side. On the Dorim is the south, but facing the Kodesh HaKadoshim on the left. And as we said, that everybody agrees that the curtain closest to the Kodesh HaKadoshim was open on the Tzofin. And this opinion holds that there were two curtains. The outer curtain was opened on the Dorim. Upnimis, and the inner curtain, Minat Tzofin, was actually perufa. It was pinned up on the Tzofin side, which was on the right hand wall, and it had to be pinned up so that the Kohen Gadol would be able to walk through whilst holding the two shovels in his, the coals and the Ketores in his hands. Mahalech benem, he would go from the Dorim side through the entranceway of the curtain that was pinned up, and he would go till the entrance by the Dorim side of the Heichal, and then he would, so to speak, make a right towards the Tzofin. He would walk between the two curtains, and here the Mefarshim discuss that he would have to use his elbows to make his way through the curtains, so that Chas v'Shalom, the curtains shouldn't get burnt from the coals. He would walk all the way to the Tzofin wall. When he reached the Tzofin wall, now on his left, on the Kohen Gadol's left, on the Tzofinmost side of the inner curtain, and then there was an entrance there. The curtain was pinned up on the Tzofin, as we saw before, Upnimis Minat Tzofin. Hoifech Ponov Ledorim, he would go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim and make a left. Now he's facing the Dorim. Mahalech L'smoiloi Ima Paroiches, he would walk along the curtains, along the Paroiches. The curtains were now on his left, until he would reach the middle of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, which is the area where the Orin was sitting, and he would make his way towards the Orin. Higia l'Orin, when he would reach the Orin, the Noisenes HaMachta, he would put the Machta, the shovel with the coals, down Bein Shnei Abadim, between the two poles of the Orin. And even though we're talking about the second Beis HaMikdash, and there was no Orin in the second Beis HaMikdash, the Gemara will discuss what the Mishnah means is that the space where what would have been the area between the two poles, had there been an Orin, that's where he would put the shovel down. And then he would pour onto the coals the Ketores. Tzovar es ha-Ketores al gabe gecholim, he would pile up the Ketores on top of the coals. V'nismale kol habayis kule oshon, and the whole room, the whole Kodesh HaKadoshim, would get filled with smoke. At that point, Yotza uboloi, he would leave the Kodesh HaKadoshim, b'derech beis knisosai, he would actually leave the Kodesh HaKadoshim in exactly the same position that he came into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, which means that he's now going to walk backwards with the curtain still on his left. He'll walk backwards till the Tzofin wall and leave the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And when he reaches the Heichal, U'mispanil tefillah k'tzora, he says a very short tefillah, bebeis hachitzoin, in the Heichal, which is called chitzoin relative to the Kodesh HaKadoshim. V'loi hayo marich b'tefillah, so he would not be marich, he would not say a long tefillah. Shloi lehav'is es Yisrael, not to scare the Klal Yisrael, not to frighten and worry them, because there were times where the Kohen Gadol, for whatever reason, he would die in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and if he took too long whilst davening there, it would make the rest of Klal Yisrael scared as to the fate of the Kohen Gadol, and therefore just say a very short tefillah and leave. Says the Gemara, B'may oskinon, What is this Mishnah talking about, where this Mishnah mentions the two curtains? Ilema b'mikdash rishon. Are we talking about the first Beis HaMikdash? Mihava pareiches? Was there any pareiches there? There was no pareiches there. There was the Amma Traxin that we learnt about previously. There was a wall between the Heichal and the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And we'll soon see them. The truth is that even in the first Beis HaMikdash, where there was a wall, there was a curtain in the center of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. In the center of that wall, there was a curtain. But here we're talking about going to the Dorim, going through the curtain, walking to the Tzofin, going through the next curtain. All that didn't apply in the first Beis HaMikdash. Elo b'mikdash sheni, it must be talking about the second Beis HaMikdash. We have Orin. You're talking about putting the shovel down between the poles of the Orin. There was no Orin in the second Beis HaMikdash. Well, Tanya, did we not learn in the Braisa, Misha Nignaz Orin, from at the time at the end, towards the end of the Beis Rishon, before the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, when the Orin was hidden, then Nignaz Imoy, then with the Orin was hidden, Tzintenes Hamon, the jar that held some of the mon, Utzluchis Shemen HaMishcha, and the flask with some of the oil that was used to anoint the Shemen HaMishcha, Umakli Shel Aaron, and Aaron HaKohen stick, Ushkedeo, and its almonds, Uprocheo, and its blossoms, Va'argaz, and with it was also the box, Sheshigroi Plishtim Doiron Lilekei Yisrael, that the Plishtim sent as a gift, so to speak, to Telekei Yisrael. Shenemer, as it says in the Pasuk says, Ulekachtem es Harein Hashem. What happened was the Plishtim had confiscated the Orin at some point, and now they had sent the Orin back to Klal Yisrael because the Plishtim realized that there were many tragedies was befalling them because they had captured the Orin. And the Pasuk says, Ulekachtem es Harein Hashem, unesatem oisoi el ha'agolo, ve'eis klei hazov asher hashivoisem loy osham, tasimu ba'argaz mitzidoi, v'shilachtem oisoi v'holoch. That these gifts that were, so to speak, sent back to Elokei Yisrael, they were placed in right next to the Orin, and the fact that it says in the Pasuk that they were placed Tasimu ba'argaz mitzido, in a box next to the Orin, so they accompanied the Orin wherever it went, and when the Orin got hidden, then so too did this box get hidden. That's the Pasuk that it says Tasimu ba'argaz mitzido v'shelachtem oisoi v'holoch. Umi Gonzoi, and who was the one that hid the Orin? Yeshayahu Gonzoi. It was Yeshayahu Hanavi. Ma Rosh Gonzoi. Why did Yeshayahu hide the Orin? Rosh Kosov, he saw that it says in the Pasuk, Yoilech Hashem Oischa, Hashem is going to send, is going to lead you, Ve'esmalkecha Ashatokim Alecha, with the king that you'll have over you, El Goya Shelo Yodata, to a nation, to people that you don't know, Atov Avisecho Vavato Shom Elim Achirim Eitz for Evan. So Yeshayahu Hanavi saw in the Psukim that at some point Klal Yisrael would be sent into exile, and therefore Omad v'Gonzo, he was afraid that whoever was going to destroy the Beis HaMikdash was going to take the Orin as well. Therefore he hid the Orin. Shenemar, as it says in the Pasuk, Vayomer laleviim hamavinim l'chol Yisrael, that, and he said to the Leviim, those who taught Klal Yisrael Hakadoshim l'Hashem, they are Kodesh to Hashem, Tnu es Harein HaKodesh, Babayis asher bono Shlomo ben David Melech Yisrael, place the Orin into the bayis, into the room, into the place that Shlomo Melech had built. And obviously this doesn't mean put the Orin in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, it was there already. Rather it means hide it in a special room that was made for this purpose by Shlomo Melech. Asher bono Shlomo ben David Melech Yisrael, Ein lochem maso bakosef, and these Leviim no longer will have to carry the Orin. Ata, and from now, Ivdu es Hashem Elokeichem ve'es Amo Yisrael, you'll just serve Hashem and Klal Yisrael, His people, and from this point the Orin will be hidden and will no longer be taken anywhere. So you see here that the Orin was hidden. So if in the second Beis HaMikdash there was no Orin, then there's the question in our Mishnah. If the Mishnah is talking about the second Beis HaMikdash, how can you speak about the space between the two poles? V'omer Rebbe Elazar says, how do we know? So we know about the box that was sent by the Plishtim as a gift, that stayed with the Orin. But how do we know that the other things were hidden with the Orin? That's in Tzenes Hamon, and the Tzleichis of the Shemen HaMishcha, and the Maklei Shel Aaron. So Rebbe Elazar says there's some Gzeiros Shavos. Asya Shama Shama. That we learn that it says by the Orin Shama. It says in the pasuk Asher Ivoid Lecha Shama by the Orin, and regarding the Mon it says in the pasuk Kach Tzentenes Achatz V'Sen Shama. So we can learn that Tzentenes Hamon was always stayed together with the Orin. Va'asya, and we learn from the Mon, Doiros Doiros. It says by the Mon, V'hanachoyse lifnei Hashem lemishmeres l'doiroseichem. And it also says regarding the Shemen HaMishcha, the oil, Vel b'nei Yisrael t'daber leimor Shemen Mishchas Kodesh yeh zeh li l'doirosam. So we learn that in the same way as the Mon was always next to the Orin, so too the Shemen HaMishcha. Va'asya, Mishmeres, and we also learn from the Mon in that same pasuk. It says, "V'hanachoyse lifnei Hashem lemishmeres l'doirosam," and by the maklei shel Aaron, the stick of Aaron, it says in the pasuk, "Vayim Hashem el Moshe hoshev es mate Aaron lifnei eidos lemishmeres leois livnei Meri," etc. So we see that it says Mishmeres by the stick of Aaron and Mishmeres by the Mon in the same way as the Mon stayed with the Orin, so too Aaron's stick. And this is the end of the question. So what we know from all this is that the Orin was hidden. So if the Mishnah is talking about the Bayis Sheni, how can you speak about between the poles? Answers the Gemara, La'olam Migdash Sheni. The Mishnah is talking about the second Beis HaMikdash, and that's why we understand that there were two curtains there. Umay higia l'Orin. What does it mean that he reached the Orin, he was facing the Orin, and he put it down between the poles? Mokim Orin. It doesn't mean the Orin itself, it means that he reached the place where the Orin was positioned in the first Beis HaMikdash. But it says explicitly, put the shovel down in between the two poles. There were no poles there. That put it in a place where had there been badim, had there been poles there, that would have been the place to put it. Continues the Gemara. Now this takes us back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah says that he would pile the Ktoires onto the coals. Tzavor, he would heap as Ktoires al gabe gecholim. Tanan, our Mishnah, command Omar Tzovra. This Mishnah is going according to the opinion that says that the Ktoires was actually heaped onto the coals, because this was actually a machlekes. And we've seen previously there was a machlekes whether it was spread out over the coals or whether it was heaped over the coals, and our Mishnah clearly holds like the opinion that Tzovar. Continues the Gemara regarding exactly how he would heap up the Ktoires onto the coals. Don't forget, he's got his cupped hands, got 2 hands full of Ktoires, which he now has to heap onto the coals. So he can either start the place furthest away from his body and slowly make that heap whilst pulling his hand back towards himself, or he could start closest to his body and make the heap by spilling it out of his hands whilst moving his hands away from himself. What position, how would he do it? Tanya Chod, in one brayso it says, Tzovra Pnima, he would start closest to the Orin, Shehi Chutzalei, which is the furthest away from the Kohen, and as he would pour, he would draw his hands towards himself. But Tanya, another brayso says the opposite. Tzovra Chutza, he starts furthest away from the Orin, closest Shehi Pnima Loi, which is the closest to himself, and as he's pouring, he moves his hands towards the Orin. So it was machlekes in the braysos. Omar Abaya says Tanoi here, it's a machlekes Tanoim. V'Omar Abaya, Mistabra command to Omar, it's probable like that first brayso, that Pnimo Shi Chutzala, he would start furthest away from himself. Ditnan. Because we learned in a Mishnah regarding the everyday Ktoires in Maseches Tomid, where there would be a Ktoires not in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, but on the Mizbeach HaPnimi, on the Mizbeach inside the Heichal, they would put coals there, and the Ktoires would be placed on the coals. And there it says regarding that, it says in the Mishnah, Melamdim Oisai, we teach the Kohen who's doing the Ktoires, Hizoyer, be careful, Shaloi Taschil Mipanecha, don't start closest to you and then move away from yourself, because as you're putting the Ktoires onto the coals, very hot smoke is going to rise, and if you're going to then continue moving away from you over the coals, you're going to burn yourself. Shemotichvem, you may burn yourself from the hot smoke that's coming up. And the same way as we see that there, the same would apply. It says Abai, it's probable that in Yom Kippur, in the Kodesh Kodashim, the same thing would apply. If you start furthest away from the Kohen Gadol and then slowly draw it back towards himself, his arm is never going to be hanging over the smoke coming up. But if he starts closest to himself and then he moves his hands further away from himself, then the smoke, the raising smoke, may burn him. Continues the Gemara Tanu Rabbanon. We learned in a brisa that the pasuk says, "V'nosan es hakteires al ho'esh lifnei Hashem." Put the ketores on the fire before Hashem when you're in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Shelo yisakin b'chutz. Don't prepare it outside whilst you're still outside the Kodesh HaKadoshim. V'yachnis, and only after you've put the ketores on the coals, then you'll come into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. No. And this is lahoitzi milibon shel tzidukim. This is contrary to the incorrect idea and opinions of the tzidukim. Sho'imrim, they would say yisakin mibachutz v'yachnis. You should first put the ketores on the coals outside the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and only that way they would go in. My Dorosh, what pasuk did they learn? It was a mistake, but what pasuk did they learn that would have suggested that you have to prepare it before? The pasuk says, "Vayemer Hashem al Moshe daber el Aaron nechicho va'al yovi b'choleis al hakodesh mibeis la'pareiches al pnei hakaporos asher al ha'orin v'lo yamus ki be'onon eiroe al hakaporos." That when you will come to the kaporos, when you'll come to the orin, it should be be'onon, with a cloud of smoke. Melamed. So what do you see from there? That you have to have the smoke before you come inside into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Melamed sheyisakin mibachutz. You prepare it outside, v'yikonis, and then the biachnis, and then you go in. You take the ketores in. It was a mistake, but that's what the tzedukim learned. Omrulem chachomim. The chachomim said no. It says in the pasuk explicitly, the pasuk at the top of the Amud, "V'nosan es hakteres alo eish lifnei Hashem." You should put the ketores on the coals only when you're inside. And if you're going to ask, "Im kein ma Talmud lo yimar ki be'onon eiroeh ala kaporos," you're going to ask, how are we going to learn the pasuk that says that when you come into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, you should come in with a smoke, or with the onon. All that tells us is, make sure that in the ketores you have an ingredient of ma'ale oshon. You have this spice, this herb inside the ketores that is going to cause the smoke to go up in a straight line, and that will make the whole room smoke up. And how do we know that you need this ingredient of ma'ale oshon? And it's an interesting question, because you just said now that we need it. We learn it from the pasuk ki be'onon eiroeh ala kaporos, that you have to take the ketores in with the potential of becoming an onon, which becoming a cloud of smoke, when that is only thanks to the ma'ale oshon. What's the Gemara asking? The Gemara will handle that soon. But either way, the Bryce is asking, u'minayin shenoisim bo ma'ale oshon, shenemer, it says in the pasuk, the first pasuk that we had here, v'chiso anan hakteres es hakaporos, and it says in this pasuk, number one, v'chiso anan hakteres. It has to be the smoke of the ketores is going to cover up es hakaporos, the orin, the covering of the orin. So if it mentions there the anan, it must have the ma'ale oshon, this ingredient that's going to make it smoke up, and also it says hakteres. And we see from the word hakteres that all the ingredients have to be in. If any one of the ingredients are missing, it's invalid. So from this pasuk we see that if you do not put ma'ale oshon, or if any one of the spices are missing from the ketores, chayev misa, then the kohen who's bringing the ketores is chayev misa. V'teipek lei dekomayil biorakonis. Why do you need a pasuk to say that when the ketores is invalid because there's something missing? That the pasuk, what does it say in the pasuk there? V'chiso anan ketores es hakaporos. How does the pasuk continue? Asher ala edus v'lo yomus. That's how we learn that if it's not hakteres, which means if any one of the ingredients are missing, and it's not with anan hakteres, it's not with the ma'ale oshon, he'll be chayev misa. Why do I need a pasuk in the parasha of ketores and parasha Acharemos by the Yom Kippur Avodah? Why do I need a pasuk there to say that if the ketores is invalid, that he'll be chayev misa? If the ketores is invalid, it's as if he went into the Kodesh HaKadoshim without ketores, and that's called that ma'ayel is going in bior reikonis. A bior going in reikonis, and empty, a useless entering into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and that in its own right is chiyuv misa, as it says in the pasuk, va'al yovei b'chol eis v'lo yamos, that if you come into the Kodesh HaKadoshim not with the intent of doing the avodah, then you'll be chayiv misa. Don't need a pasuk to say that when one of the ingredients are missing, hence rendering the Ketores invalid, that if you bring them in, you're chayiv misa. So there's two answers here. Omer of Sheishes hachab ma'askinon kegoin sheshogag b'bi'ah v'hizid b'haktorah. We know that a person will only be chayiv misa if he does an aveira b'mezid intentionally, not if he does it by mistake. So in the event that he only went in by mistake, he forgot that it was also to go in. He went in by mistake, v'hizid b'haktorah, but he intentionally brought in Ketores that was invalid, that was missing one of the ingredients. That's what we have a special pasuk to say, that even though you will not be chayiv misa for bior ikonis because you did that b'sheigig, but you will be chayiv for bringing Ketores shechiser achas mikol samonel. That was Rav Shesh's answer. Rav Ashi Omar afilu teima hizid bazu. Even if both were b'mezid, we need both pasuk. Both psukim kagoin da'ayil shtei haktoris. If you brought two sets of Ketores at the same time while it's coming into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, he had one Ketores that was missing and one that was not missing. Achas shleima, one that was complete, v'achas chaser, and one that was missing. So abiyah, so on the coming into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, lo mechayev, he won't be chayev because it's not a bior ikonis. He didn't come in for nothing. He had kosher Ketores with him. D'hamai lo shleima, because he went into the Kodesh HaKadoshim with Ketores that was not lacking. A haktorah, but the second one, the Ketores that he's going to put on, which is lacking, which is missing, mechayev, he's going to be chayev. D'hamiktar Ketores chasera, because if he burns Ketores, which is missing any ingredient in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, he's chayev misa. That's the separate pasuk that says v'lo yamus, that he'll be chayev for chiser achas mikol samanel. And now the Gemara is going back to the Brisa. The Brisa started by saying that, in contrast to what the Tzedukim said, that from the pasuk of Ki be'ono nero ala kaperes, they learned that you have to put the Ketores on the coals before you go in. The Chacham said, no, that's not what you learn from there. You learn from there that you need the ingredient called male oshon, the ingredient that will ultimately, in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, when the Ketores is poured onto the coals, it will make the smoke go up in a straight line, and that shaft of smoke, because it's going up like that, will then hit the ceiling, then it will disperse the ceiling level on the whole Kodesh HaKadoshim, and when there's no more area to disperse, the smoke will then travel down the walls and fill up the whole Kodesh HaKadoshim. So that's the source that you need Ma'ale Oshon. And then immediately after that, the Brisa says, how do you know you need Ma'ale Oshon? And we bring the other pasuk, which is in many psukim later, in pasuk Yud Gimel, we bring the pasuk that says there, v'chisa anana Ketores. So we've got two psukim that mention the anana Ketores. We shouldn't really need two psukim, one would be enough. Omar mar, uminayin shenoisim bo ma'ale oshon, Talmud loymar, v'chisa. You learn that from the v'chisa, that's in pasuk Yud Gimel. But I don't understand. A moment earlier you said that you learn it from the pasuk Ki be'ono nero ala kaperes, which is pasuk base. Why do I need also pasuk base Ki be'ono nero ala kaperes, and also pasuk Yud Gimel that says v'chisa anan hakteres? And we're going to have 6 answers to this question. Why do we need 2 psukim to tell us that you need the ma'ale oshon? Kro, this is the question of the Gemara. Do I need a pasuk to be a source for what it says in another pasuk? Because you bring one pasuk base, Ki be'ono nero ala kaperes, then you bring another pasuk, and how do you know that you need the onon? And then you bring pasuk Yud Gimel, v'chisa anan hakteres. We don't need a pasuk to back up another pasuk. So we're going to see 6 answers. Omer of Yosef, first answer, Rav Yosef says, Hachika Omer. The Brisa means to say like this, Ein li elo alo ma'ale oshon. The ma'ale oshon was a certain plant. This plant has a root and it has a leaf. I may have thought that you're only allowed to use the leaf, which is the best part of this plant, to do the ma'ale oshon. I may have thought you're only allowed to use the alo of the ma'ale oshon, ikar ma'ale oshon, but the root of this plant called ma'ale oshon, minayin, how do you know that's also okay? Talmud leima v'chisa. That's why I need pasuk Yud Gimel to say v'chisa anan hakteres, as long as it's going to achieve the results, that the whole room is going to become full of smoke, it suffices. Omale Abaya. Abaya said to Rav Yosef that it seems from you, Rav Yosef, that it's preferable to use the leaf, and you need a separate pasuk to say you're also allowed to use the root. In a Brisa, it seems to say the opposite. The Tanya, Nosan bo ikar ma'ale oshon. that the Kohen Gadol, they put in, whoever prepares the Ketores, puts in the root of the Ma'ale Oshon, and Hoyom Metamer V'oile V'kamakel, then the smoke would rise up like a stick, until it reaches the ceiling. Once it reaches the ceiling, it then goes all across the ceiling and goes down the walls. Until the whole house is full of smoke, until the whole Kodesh HaKadoshim is full of smoke. Shneimar, as it says in the Pasuk, Oshon. The whole Kodesh HaKadoshim fills with smoke. But what do you see from there? That they would put in, what would they put in? Iker Ma'ale Oshon, the roots, not the leaf. If it's more preferable to use the leaf, why doesn't it say there, Nosan bo ale Ma'ale Oshon, the leaf of the Ma'ale Oshon? Elom Abaya, this is the second explanation. Abaya says, Hachik Omar, in the same theme as Rav Yosef, just the other way around. Ein lielo Iker Ma'ale Oshon, that the Bryce is telling me that if it will just say one pasuk in pasuk base, I may have thought you have to use you're only allowed to use the root of the Ma'ale Oshon, which is the most preferable part. Alo Ma'ale Oshon, but to use the leaf, minayin, how do you know? Talmud Lema v'chisa, that's what it says in Pasuk Yud Gimel, v'chisa anan hakteres, anything that will cause the Kodesh HaKadoshim to become full of smoke suffices. The third answer of Sheishes Omar, Ein li elo oihel moed. Shebamidbar, that if I'd only have the first pasuk, the pasuk base that says Ki be'onon iroya ala kapoires, I may have thought that you're only chayev misa if you don't put Ma'ale Oshon. That means you're only chayev to put Ma'ale Oshon only in the oil moed, in the midbar, in the mishkan. Shiloi, however, in mishkan Shiloi, not in the midbar. Ubeis Elamim and the Beis Hamikdash. Minayin, how do you know that there also you need this ingredient called Ma'ale Oshon? Talmud Lema v'chisa, that's why it says, we learn that from Pasuk Yud Gimel, v'chisa anan hakteres, ala kaperes hashalo edus, that anywhere, any mishkan or Beis Hamikdash, wherever the Shechina is, that's where you have to have Ma'ale Oshon. Says the Gemara, and the Gemara asks now against Rav Sheishes, that we learn that out from another Pasuk. Hi, this is learnt out from the Pasuk that says, v'chein yaseh le'oyel moed hashoichein itom b'toichtum oisam. It says there that wherever the avodah of the Yom Kippurim has to be done anywhere where Hashem is residing with you. So you see from there that whatever had to be done in the Mishkan had to be done in Mishkan Shiloi and in the Beis Elamim, in the Beis Hamikdash. So I don't need the Pasuk Yud Gimel v'chisa anan hakteres to tell me that. Elo, the fourth explanation, Hachi Ka'amar, Ein li elo b'yom Kippurim. I may have thought that you only chayev to put Ma'ale Oshon in the Ketores on Yom Kippur. B'shari Mois Hashanah, but the Ketores that is done the whole year, the Ketores that wasn't done in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, it was done in the Heichal, but it was done the whole year. Minayin, how do you know that there also you need to have the Ma'ale Oshon? Talmud Lema v'chisa, that's what Pasuk Yud Gimel is telling us. V'chisa anan hakteres hakaperes alo edus v'lo yomus, is teaching us that whenever you do the Ketores, you need to have Ma'ale Oshon. Rav Ashi Omar, this is the fifth explanation. Chad le'mitzvah v'chad le'akev. They're talking about both psukim are talking about the same thing. If you would only say it once, I would think it's a mitzvah to put Ma'ale Oshon. How do I know it's essential? Without it, it's ma'akev and it's invalid. That's when it says it twice, and we know there's a rule that whenever the Torah says something twice, then definitely regarding Kochim, it's a Shaila in the Rishonim regarding other areas in Torah. But in these halachas, if it says something twice, it's there to teach us that it's ma'akev. Rava Omar, this is the sixth answer. Rava said, Chad le'oinish v'chad le'azhara. We know that whenever a person is chayev misa, then the pasuk has warned him and have told him the punishment. So here you've got the two psukim. Pasuk base says, Ki be'onon iroya la kaperes, which means that's the warning. Make sure you put in Ma'ale Oshon so that there should be a cloud of smoke. And the second pasuk, the pasuk Yud Gimel, tells us v'lo yomus, that if you do not put Ma'ale Oshon, it'll be chayev misa. Titania, we saw this in a brayso, Eliezer Omer, v'lo yomus. The pasuk Yud Gimel where it says v'lo yomus oinish, that's the punishment, and the pasuk base that says Ki be'onon iroya azhara, that's the warning. And now the brayso is taking us to another related topic, and that is that we know that Nadav and Avihu, the two sons of Aaron HaKohen, they brought Ketores, and we know that when they brought Ketores, then a fire came out and killed them. They both got killed. So we're assuming at this point that the reason they got killed was because they brought the Ketores, but they did not put in the ingredient called Male Oshan. So the Gemara, the Bryce is saying, Yachil yu shneim amurim koidem misas b'nei Aaron. Can we assume that both of these psukim, the warning and the punishment, was both said before the sons of Aaron died, and then that would explain why they died? Talmud Lema says the Bryce no, because it says in the pasuk, "Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe, achrei Mos shnei bnei Aaron b'karvasam lefnei Hashem vayomusu." It says clearly that this parasha of the Avodas Yom Kippurim was said after the sons of Aaron died. Can it be that both the psukim that were said, also the one we used, the pasuk base, which is the warning, and also the punishment, were both said after Aaron's children died? Talmud Lema no. It says in pasuk base, Ki be'onon eiroe ala kapires. And the word eiroe seems to be in future tense. The Gemara is about to explain it. But from this pasuk, Ki be'onon eiroe ala kapires, we learn that the Shekhinah had not yet come down. And we know that the sons of Aaron died after the Shekhinah came down. Haketzad. How do we learn this pasuk? Or how do we understand that part of the psukim happened after they died, which was after the Shekhinah came down, and part of the psukim were there before the Shekhinah came down, which is definitely before they died? As hara koidem misa, the pasuk base that's warning them by saying Ki be'onon eiroe ala kapires, that was said before they die. But oynish, the punishment of that if you do not put Male Oshan, you'll be chayiv misa, that was achar misa, that was only said after they died. My Talmuda, where do you see in the words where do you see in the pasuk that from the word Ki be'onon eiroe that it was before they died? This pasuk base, how do you know that the pasuk base, which is the warning, was given before they died? Omar Rava, Omar Kro, because it says in the pasuk, Ki be'onon eiroe. Eiroe is in future tense. I will rest the Shekhinah on you in the cloud of the Ketores. V'adayin lo nira, but not yet. The Shekhinah had not yet come down. So this was clearly before they died. But the pasuk Yud Gimel that says that v'lo yomos, that if you don't put Male Oshan, then it's chayiv misa, that was not said before they died. So the Gemara says, if so, ve'elomai tamu ianush. If you didn't tell them it was punishable by death, how can you put them to death? Says the Gemara, they died for a completely different reason. They didn't die because there was no Male Oshan. They died kedetanya Reb Eliezer Omer lo meisu b'nei Aaron. The reason that Aaron died was only elo al shehoiru halacha b'fnei Moshe Rabban, because they introduced a halacha which was 100% correct, but they said it before Moshe Rabbeinu, and they didn't ask him first. They just stated a halacha before him. My Dorosh. Where would we see that in the psukim? Because it says in the pasuk, "V'nosnu b'nei Aaron hakohen eish ala mizbeach," that the sons of Aaron, they placed fire onto the mizbeach. V'afal pi she'eish yorda min hashamayim. What did they say from this pasuk? That even though the Shekhinah brought down fire from Shamayim, mitzvah lahavim min hedyot, nonetheless, it's a mitzvah for the human beings, for the koyens, the hedyot, to go and put fire there. So even though there was fire there, it says v'nosnu b'nei Aaron hakohen eish. They took fire, even though there was already fire min hashamayim. They added fire because it was a mitzvah. They were right. There is a mitzvah to put fire. But did you ask Moshe Rabbeinu permission first? They were meira alocha b'fnei Moshe Rabban, and that's why they were chayiv misa. Continues the Mishnah, taking us back to the next stage in the Mishnah. Yotzo baloi derech knisasei. When the Kohen Gadol would leave the Kodesh HaKadoshim, he would leave walking backwards. That means in the same position he was in when he came in, facing Dorim, and then facing the Orin. On the way back, he would just backtrack his steps, walking backwards. Minoanameli. What would be the source for that? Where do we know that it's important when one's going to the Shekhinah, that it's important that one walks away, one walks backwards? Omer Shmuel ben Achmeni, Omer Rabbi Yonason, Omer Kra. This is learned from a pasuk in Divrei Yomim. The pasuk says, "Vayoyme, vayovoi shloimoi Shlomo Melech came la bomo asher begivoin Yerushalayim. So we have to understand, Shlomo Melech came from Yerushalayim to Givoin, which is where the Boma was. The Boma was in place of the Mishkan, but that's where they would bring the Korbanos. There was a Boma there. So Shlomo came from Yerushalayim to Givoin. The problem is, why does it say La Boma asher begivoin Yerushalayim? V'chimayin in Givoin hetzel Yerushalayim. Givoin is nowhere near Yerushalayim. Elo makish yitziosay mi Givoin le Yerushalayim. The reason that the Pasuk puts the two words Givoin Yerushalayim together is to compare his going from Givoin to Yerushalayim to his coming from Yerushalayim to Givoin. Ma bi'asim Yerushalayim leGivoin, in the same way as when he came from Yerushalayim to Givoin, Ponov klapi Boma, his face was facing Givoin, it was facing the Boma, facing the Kedusha. Kederech bi'asay. So too, when he was going back home, after he finished in Givoin, he was going back to Yerushalayim, Ponov klape Boma, his face was facing the Kedusha, it remained facing the Boma in Givoin, Kederech bi'asa, in the way he came. Continues the Gemara, V'chein kohanim ba'avoidasam, also the kohanim when they're doing the avodah, u'leviim b'duchonim, the leviim who are on their stage playing the musical instruments, v'yisrael b'mamodon, and those of Yisrael that represented all the Eden that had to be there to, at the time that the Korban Tamid was brought, there was a few people who would be there on behalf of Klal Yisrael to be present whilst the Korban Tamid was being brought. That all of these Kashem Niftorim, when they leave the Beis HaMikdash, when they leave their place of Avodah, Lo Yayu Machzirim Pneim, they wouldn't just turn around, turn their backs on where they were, v'hoilchin, and go. Elamatzadim pneim, they would slightly turn their bodies to the side, v'hoilchin, and they would sort of walk backwards, sideways, stroke backwards, in respect for the place of the avodah. And the Gemara continues, v'chein talmid haniftar mirabbai, also a talmid that's going away from his rebbe, lo yachzeh ponov v'yelech, he shouldn't just turn away and with his back towards his rebbe and walk away. Elamatzadim ponov v'yelech, he should slightly turn to the side and walk backwards away from his Rebbe. Kihad Rebbe Elazar, as we see from Rebbe Elazar, could have a mifter mineder Rabbi Yochanan, when he would leave Rabbi Yochanan his Rebbe, then it didn't matter either way, whether it was Rebbe Elazar taking leave of his Rebbe Rabbi Yochanan or Rabbi Yochanan taking leave of Rebbe Elazar. So could have a boy Rabbi Yochanan lizguya, when his Rebbe Rabbi Yochanan, when it was time for him to go, have a gochin Koi Rebbe Elazar Duchte, Rebbe Elazar would stand in his place and bow in respect, Ad have a Michser Rabbi Yochanan Minei, until Rabbi Yochanan was concealed from him, could no longer see his Rebbe. We could have a boy Rebbe Elazar Lizguya, when Rebbe Elazar the Talmud wanted to go out, have a Ka'ozi La'achira, he would go backwards, Ad the Michser Minei Rabbi Yochanan, until he could no longer see Rabbi Yochanan. Continues the Gemara, Rava could have a mifter mineder of Yosef. When Rava would take leave of his Rebbe of Yosef, have a ozil la'achire, he would go backwards from Rav Yosef, ad the menagfon kare, until his legs got bruised. Umisvason, and askufta, the Beir of Yosef, and the threshold of the home of Rav Yosef would get dirtied, doma of the blood that was oozing out of Rava's bruised legs, his bruised feet, because he would go backwards away from his Rebbe of Yosef. And this reminds us somewhat of Rava, who was so immersed in his learning in Shabbos Daf Peches that his fingers would bleed. Amru Leila Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef, who was blind, he didn't see the tremendous respect that Rava showed for him. But they told Rav Yosef that this is how your Talmud takes leave of you. And it's amazing that Rava did this even though his Rebbe couldn't see him. Hocha of its Rava, they told Rav Yosef, this is what Rava used to do. Omar Le, so Rav Yosef said to Rava, Yehi Rava, it should be the Ratzon of Hashem, the desire of Hashem, the Torum Reishcha, that your head, that you should be lifted, elevated, Akoila Krocha, over the whole city, you should become the Rosh Hashiva of the whole town. Omar Rebbe Alexandri, Omar Rebbe Yeshua ben Levi, HaMispalel, when somebody is davening Shmoneh Esrei, then tzorech she'afsia sholish psios me'chorov, he should go 3 steps backwards, v'achar kach yitin sholim, and then he says the oiseh sholim at the end of the Shmoneh Esrei. Omar Leir of Mordechai, So Rav Mordechai said, Kivan sheposa sholish psiyos le'achirov, once he's gone 3 steps back, he should remain standing in his place for some time. Exactly how long, the Gemara doesn't tell us. It's a discussion in the Rishonim and in the Poskim. Mashal leTalmid aniftar meRabbi. This is analogous to a Talmud that steps away from his Rebbe. Im chayzer le'alto, if he's going to just walk away and then come straight back, is doime lekelev sheshov al kiyoi. It's like, it's compared to a dog that vomits and then goes straight back and licks up the vomit. And the Mefarshim discuss what the mashal is, but either way it's inappropriate to go away and then to come back as if there was no purpose of you going away. If you went away and you stay away, it means that it had a purpose and a need to take leave. But if you just go and come, then it's disrespectful. The Brisa also says that at the end of Shmoneh Esrei, a person should take 3 steps back, and then he says Oiseh Sholim. And if he doesn't do that, it would have been better had he not davened. That in the name of Shemaiah, or according to the Bach, Rav Shemaiah, it was said, Shenoisen Sholim liyamin. When doing Oiseh Sholim, you first bow to the right, v'achar kach l'smoil, and then to the left. Where do we see that the right is more prestigious, is more prominent? Shneimar, it says in the pasuk, Miminoi eish dos lomoi, that the Torah was given with Hashem's right hand. V'oimer is another pasuk that says, Yipoil mitzitcha elef, 1,000 of the enemies will fall from your left side, and 10,000 will fall from your right side. So you see here that the right side can take on 10,000 when the left can only take on 1,000. So you see the right is stronger and more prestigious. Why do I need the second pasuk? Are you going to say, the Brisa means as follows, are you going to say that Urcha de Milsai, Lemeisav Biyamin, are you going to say there's no proof from the fact that Hashem gave the Torah with his right hand, so to speak? There's no proof from there that the right is more prominent. Maybe it's just the right is always the hand, it's a stronger hand, and it's the hand that's used to give things. So Hashem gave us the Torah, he gave it with his right hand. And there's no proof that the right is always more prestigious. Toshma, that's why we have the second pasuk, that you see that the right side is intrinsically more prominent, and therefore should be given. One should start with the right and then move to the left. And obviously, these are not concepts that we're allowed to understand in literal terms. Hashem doesn't have hands, and Hashem doesn't have any form whatsoever. But it's just the way that the psukim are talking to us. Rava Chazia LaAbaya, Rava saw that Abaya, the Yoav Shalma, when he said Oiseh Sholim, when he finished Shmoneh Esrei, Liyamina Bereisha, that as we saw before, he first moved to the right and then to the left, to his right and then to his left. Omar Alei, he said to him, Mis Savras, did you really think that what we meant is Liyamin Ditcha, that you should start with your right? L'Smoil Ditcha, we meant that your left. Why your left called L'Smoil Ditcha Ka'amina? When I said the left, when I said the right, I didn't mean your right, I mean your left. When a person is facing somebody else, then my right is facing your left, and your right is facing my left. So if, so to speak, we are facing the Shekhinah, then the right is more prominent. It means that we have to give recognition to Hashem's right first, which means our left. Omer of Chia Bereder of Huna, Chazina Lula Abaya v'Rava the Posilu Sholish Psiyos B'Kriya Achas. I saw that Abaya and Rava, when they went back the 3 steps, it was done with a single bow. They would bow, and whilst in that position, they would go 3 steps back. Continues the Gemara. U'mispanil Tfilah K'tzara B'Beis HaChitzon. We saw in the Mishnah that the Kohen Gadol, when he came out of the Kodesh HaKadoshim and he was in the Heichal, he would say a short tefillah. Says the Gemara, my Matzli, what would he daven for? This is the Kohen Gadol, on Yom Kippur, the greatest man in the greatest place, the greatest time, is now going to say a tefillah. What's it say in this tefillah? Rav bar Rav Ada, V'Ravin bar Rav Ada, Tarvayu Mishmei Rav, they both said in the name of Rav. Omri, he said as follows, Yehirotzin, it should be your desire milfanecha before you, Hashem Elokeinu, Shetehei Shana Zu, that this year should be Geshuma. there should be plenty rain. Ushchuna, and it should be hot. Ushchuna malya, so he asks the Gemara, is it an advantage that the year should be hot? Elo'ema, he would say, im shchuna, if it's destined that the year is going to be hot, tehego shuma, at least there should be lots of rain that the produce can grow. That's what the Kohen Gadol was worried about when he came out of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, that all of Klal Yisrael should have ample sustenance. Rav Acha B'Reid Rava Masayim Bo Mishmeid Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav Yehuda that the Kohen Gadol would continue and end his tefillah with a few other points. Number one, Lo Ye'adi, it should not pass, it should not stop. Ovid Shulton, those who exercise rulership, the kings of Klal Yisrael, Midabeis Yehuda, that they should constantly be from the descendants of Yehuda. Another point he would say, the Klal Yisrael should not need to have sustenance one from the other, there should be ample sustenance, everyone on their own. And number three, the people who are traveling on their way, they're davening that there shouldn't be rain. The Kohen Gadol would say that tefillah should not be heard by Hashem. Hashem, give the people who need the rain in their fields, give them the rain. Continues the Gemara. Reb Chanina ben Doisa have a ka'ozil ba'urcha. Chanina ben Doisa, who was traveling, walking along the way, shoda mitra alei, and rain descended upon him, and it distressed him. Omai said to Hashem, the whole world are happy with this rain. They all have fields. They're very comfortable with their rain. V'chanina b'tzar, and I, Chanina, I'm walking in the rain, and I'm in distress. Posag mitra, Hashem immediately heard his tefillah, and the rain stopped. Ki also lebeisa, when he came home, Omar, he said, Rebbeinu Shleilam, kol olam kulei b'tzar, the whole world is in distress, they have fields, there's no rain. V'chanina b'nachas, and I, who happen not to have any fields, I'm in comfort, we need the rain. Also mitra, and immediately the rain started coming down. Omer Rav Yosef, Rav Yosef said, Ma'ahanya leit sleisa de Kohen Gadol legabe Reb Chanina ben Doisa, that Reb Chanina ben Doisa, who lived at the end of the period of the second Beis Hamikdash, then Rav Yosef would say that when Reb Chanina ben Doisa was davening, that tefillah would override even the tefillah of the Kohen Gadol. Continues the Gemara. Tanu Rabbanon, Maisa b'Kohen Gadol echod sheherich b'tfilosei. The Mishnah said that he should not be marich b'tefillah. Don't stay in the heichal and have a long tefillah. No, because people will be concerned. Maybe if you're taking so long to come out, maybe something happened to the Kohen Gadol, and therefore try and just say a quick tefillah and come out. There was this Kohen Gadol who was very marich. He spent a long time davening. V'nimnu echov ha'kohenim, and his brethren the kohenim decided likonis achrov, to go in. Maybe he's died. They have to go in. They have to take him out. They have to know what to do further. As they started going in, the Kohen Gadol came out. The Kohenim said to the Kohen Gadol, why did you spend so much time davening? He said to them, is it hard in your eyes? I davened for you. I davened that the Beis Hamikdash shouldn't get destroyed. So, of course I need to daven and take my time there. They said to him, Al tirog elasus kain. You don't become accustomed to doing that. We learned, it's more important to make sure that the Klal Yisrael waiting for you are not concerned and not worried. Say the short tefillah and come straight back out. And in Mirz Hashem in the next year, we're going to continue from here.